In 2011, heiress Elena Harrow and her husband Oliver vanish during a 10-day trip into the Appalachian Mountains. Elena, bound to a wheelchair after a devastating accident, had hoped the wilderness might heal their fractured marriage. For 3 years, no trace emerges, until a hiker stumbles upon Elena's wheelchair wedged in a crevice, her shoes scattered, her diary torn to shreds. Her remains confirm tragedy, yet Oliver is still missing, and forensic evidence reveals not just his blood, but a third, unknown DNA. Was it murder, betrayal, or something darker, lurking in the mountains? The silence holds the answer. The story begins in 2008 on a rain-slick highway, where Elena Harrow, elegant, confident, and heiress to her late father's luxury car dealership, drives home in one of her showroom's shining vehicles when a fully loaded truck barrels into her lane. The world erupts in shattering glass and screeching metal, and everything fades to silence as she is pulled from the wreck, broken and bloodied. In the sterile brightness of the hospital, doctors deliver the verdict. Her spine is damaged beyond repair. She may never walk again, though a faint hope of recovery exists in 10 years. Elena, once admired for her strength and poise, is transformed overnight into a woman bound to a wheelchair, her future narrowed, her independence stripped, her grief compounded by the lingering ghost of her father's death 8 years prior, whose empire she has struggled to uphold. At her side through the recovery is Oliver Crane, her longtime boyfriend of 10 years, who marries her not long after the accident, a union born of loyalty, but strained almost immediately by unspoken resentments. At their wedding, Oliver's smile is tight, his eyes clouded with unease, and on their first night together as husband and wife, he falters when lifting her into bed, his hesitation betraying the weight of responsibility he cannot admit aloud. Married life quickly curdles. Elena, sharp-tongued and proud, begins accusing him of straying, of finding comfort in other women, while Oliver, once devoted, grows distant, snapping during arguments with words that cut deep. "I didn't sign up for this," he blurts in anger one night, only to collapse into apologies the next morning. These scenes, witnessed and absorbed by Elena's younger sister Clara, reveal a marriage built on love eroded by bitterness. Clara herself becoming Elena's only true confidant, listening late at night to whispered fears that Oliver's devotion has thinned into resentment. Yet Elena is not only broken, she is restless, and as years pass, the weight of her chair, her business, and her marriage suffocate her, until by 2011 she resolves to reclaim a fragment of freedom. In a moment of desperate determination, she turns to Oliver and proposes an escape, a 10-day retreat into the Appalachian Mountains, a chance to breathe, to mend what is fraying, to step outside the walls that confine her. "Let's go away," she tells him with a fragile smile. "Just us, 10 days, no phones, no fights. The mountains will heal us." Oliver hesitates, his jaw tight, his silence stretching too long, but at last he agrees, if only to end the conversation. For Elena, the trip represents hope, for her marriage, for her spirit, for the life she lost but still believes she can grasp again. And with that choice, the stage is set for a journey that will lead them deep into the wilderness, into shadows of love and resentment, and into the silence that will one day swallow them whole. The mountains rise in waves of mist and shadow as Elena and Oliver arrive in the Appalachians, their car winding along narrow forest roads until they reach a modest trailhead where the world of civilization falls away behind them. For a time, the wilderness works its magic. Oliver pushes Elena's rugged outdoor wheelchair over winding paths, and she marvels at the hush of towering trees and the endless sprawl of valleys below, her face lit with a joy that has long been absent. Together, they capture fleeting snapshots of normalcy, roasting marshmallows by firelight, sharing quiet laughter, pausing to gaze at a sky scattered with so many stars it seems to overwhelm the earth. Each day they call Clara to report their adventures, Elena's voice animated as she says, "We saw waterfalls today. The water was so clear you could see straight through the rocks." And Clara, listening from her kitchen, feels a fragile optimism rekindled. Yet beneath these moments, the undercurrent of tension remains, surfacing one night as they sit by the fire. Elena, staring into the flames, turns to Oliver and whispers with wounded suspicion, "You don't look at me the same way anymore. Who is she?" Oliver stiffens, his jaw tight, before lashing out with a fury that startles even him. "There's no one else, Elena, but you never stop accusing, never stop doubting me." His voice echoes into the surrounding woods, swallowed by the trees, leaving only the crackle of fire and the sound of Elena's quiet breathing. The silence that follows is heavier than the storm clouds building above. The next morning, the sky opens and rain lashes down in heavy sheets, flooding the trails and hammering against the thin canvas of their tent. Elena, restless in the damp, calls Clara one last time. Her tone is light, almost playful, as she describes the storm outside, laughing at the way Oliver struggles to keep the firewood dry, insisting, "Everything's fine, don't worry." Clara, reassured by the warmth in her sister's voice, hangs up smiling, never knowing it will be their final conversation. As night falls, the storm intensifies, the forest alive with the roar of wind and water, their tent bending under the weight of the rain, shadows flickering across the nylon walls as the fire gutters out, leaving the couple enclosed in darkness, the sound of thunder rolling through the valley like a warning. The camera lingers on the trembling tent, rain striking like bullets, until at last the scene fades into silence. By dawn, the storm has passed, the forest is still, and the tent stands abandoned in the clearing. Elena and Oliver are gone. No tracks, no voices, no trace of where they have gone or what has befallen them. What began as a retreat for healing has unraveled into a mystery, the mountains claiming them without witness, leaving only questions that will haunt the years to come. In the days following Elena and Oliver's disappearance, the Appalachian wilderness becomes a stage of desperate activity. Helicopters skim low over the ridges, their blades chopping through mist as spotters scan valleys for any sign of movement, while volunteers with search dogs comb through brush and muddy trails, their calls of "Elena! Oliver!" swallowed by the vastness of the forest. Camps are set up, maps spread across hoods of vehicles, red markers circling likely routes, and every morning the teams set out with grim determination. Yet, day after day, nothing emerges but silence. No footprints beyond their campsite, no discarded gear, no sign of struggle. The tent remains as the only anchor to their presence, damp and sagging in the clearing, its contents strangely undisturbed. After weeks of fruitless searching, the official efforts dwindle, leaving Clara, Elena's younger sister, to wrestle alone with a gnawing fear that will not subside. Clara's life becomes consumed by the mystery, her nights restless with nightmares of Elena calling from the woods, her days haunted by memories of that last phone call when her sister laughed lightly about the storm and promised everything was fine. She replays the sound of Elena's voice over and over, as though listening closely enough might reveal a hidden plea beneath the laughter. As months turn into years, the media seizes upon the case, splashing headlines across newspapers and news broadcasts. Heiress and husband vanish in Appalachian mountains. Mystery of the missing couple baffles authorities. Reporters descend on Clara, shoving microphones toward her face as she pleads for answers, her words trembling with both grief and fury. "My sister didn't just vanish. Someone knows what happened." The public divides sharply in opinion. Some believe Oliver killed Elena, spurred by resentment and wearied by her accusations, perhaps shoving her into a ravine before fleeing into the wilderness. Others suggest they were victims of the unforgiving terrain, a misstep, a swollen river, a fall that left them hidden where no search could reach. Darker whispers speak of predators, both human and otherwise, roaming the forest and preying on the vulnerable. Clara's conviction hardens. She insists Oliver is guilty, fueled by years of hearing Elena's doubts about his fidelity and the bitter arguments that marked their marriage. He had motive, Clara tells police repeatedly. He resented her. He wanted her gone. But even as she builds her case in her mind, the absence of Oliver's body weakens the narrative. If he killed her, why vanish too? If he fled, why leave behind his car, his wallet, his life? This contradiction gnaws at investigators and family alike, creating a fog of uncertainty in which every theory collapses under scrutiny. Clara attends support groups for families of the missing, yet she finds no comfort, only the steady erosion of hope. She begins compiling her own investigation, timelines, photographs, fragments of old diary entries Elena once shared, Oliver's bank statements she manages to access through legal channels. The deeper she digs, the more shadows she uncovers in Oliver's life. Debts he never mentioned, nights unaccounted for, conversations overheard that hinted at secrets. By 2012, the public grows weary of the story, shifting attention to newer tragedies, but Clara refuses to let her sister's memory fade. She hires private investigators, retraces hiking trails herself, and even confronts Oliver's family, who staunchly defend him, insisting he loved Elena and would never harm her. Yet Clara remembers the hesitations, the clipped tones, the sighs of exhaustion when Oliver thought no one was listening. Her mind paints him again and again as the villain of the story. Each anniversary of Elena's disappearance becomes a ritual. Clara returns to the mountains, stands at the trailhead, and leaves flowers pinned to a tree, whispering into the silence, "I will find you." As the years slip by with no answers, Clara becomes increasingly haunted. Her dreams grow vivid, replaying that final stormy night, the tent shaking under the wind, shadows flickering across its walls, Oliver's voice raised in anger, Elena's cries muffled by thunder. Sometimes the dream ends with Oliver's silhouette dragging the wheelchair toward the dark forest. Other times, another figure lurks just beyond the firelight, faceless, watching. Each version of the dream feels like a possibility, leaving Clara unsure whether her subconscious is unraveling or trying to reveal the truth. The case officially grows cold, the police shelving files, but in Clara's world, the mystery is a wound that refuses to close. Friends drift away, her own relationships falter, and she is known in her community less as a sister and more as the woman who won't let go. The years of silence weigh on her like stones, pressing harder with each unanswered day, until by 2014 she lives in a state of restless obsession, waiting, begging for any fragment of evidence to surface, for something, anything, to break the stillness that has held her sister's fate in the grip of the mountains. In the autumn of 2014, when the mystery of Elena and Oliver had nearly faded from headlines, a lone hiker trekking a narrow, seldom-used path stumbled upon something grotesquely out of place. A wheelchair, rusted and battered, wedged deep into the rocky maw of a crevice where sunlight barely reached. The hiker froze, the sight uncanny, like a ghost of civilization swallowed by nature. Nearby, a pair of women's shoes lay damp and decayed, their leather rotted through, and scattered scraps of fabric clung to branches as though caught in one last struggle. Most chilling of all, tucked among the debris was the cover of a diary, its pages ripped violently away, scraps of torn paper fluttering like dead leaves across the ground. Authorities swarmed the site within days, and the forensics team descended with ropes, lights, and solemn precision. Bones were found wedged further down in the dark crevice, later confirmed as Elena's remains. For a moment, it seemed the mystery was solved. She had fallen, broken, and perished in the silence of the mountains. But the evidence soon told a stranger story. Fractures in her skeleton did not align with the simple geometry of a fall. Some breaks bore marks of blunt force, deliberate trauma inflicted before death. On the wheelchair frame itself, dried traces of blood lingered, preserved by rust, but when tested, the results rattled investigators. Not only did the blood belong to Elena, but also to Oliver, whose whereabouts had remained a void. Stranger still, a third DNA profile appeared in the samples, belonging to neither of them. This revelation shattered the clean narrative of a tragic accident. Clara, called to the sheriff's office to be informed of her sister's confirmed death, sat rigid in her chair, her grief colliding with a sickening vindication. She demanded answers Oliver could not provide, for he remained missing. Forensics unearthed more. The diary's few legible scraps suggested Elena had felt uneasy in the final days, scribbling lines that hinted at paranoia or foresight. "Someone is watching us," one entry read, the ink jagged, smudged as though the pen was dragged in haste. Police investigators pieced together witness accounts, and locals soon recalled sightings of a drifter in the area around 2011, a gaunt figure loitering near campsites, a shadow in the tree line. Old police reports surfaced, pointing to a string of other disappearances in the same stretch of wilderness, all unsolved, all quietly forgotten. Was it possible Elena and Oliver had crossed paths with something far darker than marital discord? Clara, ever steadfast in her belief that Oliver was guilty, clung to evidence of his life insurance policy, quietly taken out on Elena mere months before their trip, as proof of motive. To her, it painted a clear picture. Oliver, resentful of his wife's disability, burdened by debts he could not climb out from, plotted to profit from her death. But even this theory strained under the weight of new evidence. If he killed her, how did his blood end up spattered on her wheelchair? Why had his body never surfaced? And what of the third unknown DNA, a shadow stitched into their final night? The media roared back to life, broadcasting the discovery with lurid fascination. "Wheelchair found in Appalachian Crevice, heiress confirmed dead," the headlines blared, fueling speculation and fear. Talk show panels debated whether Oliver was a cold-blooded killer or a second victim swallowed by the mountains. Online forums erupted with theories of drifters, cults, and serial killers, weaving the case into local legend. Meanwhile, Clara's grief sharpened into fury. She appeared on television accusing Oliver directly. He wanted her gone, he killed her, and when his plan collapsed, he ran. But each time she spoke, doubt crept in. Could Oliver have been the one to die first, dragged into the woods by some unknown predator, leaving Elena defenseless in her chair, trapped and brutalized? Could the diary's torn pages have been ripped not by Oliver, but by another hand, silencing words that might have revealed the truth? Forensics could not say. The DNA of the third individual belonged to no one in police records. It was as though the mountains themselves had conjured a phantom to haunt the case. As investigators pored over every scrap of evidence, contradictions piled high. Some insisted Oliver had struck Elena in rage, bloodied himself in the process, and attempted to stage her death as an accident, only to meet his own end in the wilderness. Others pointed to the eerie pattern of nearby disappearances, suggesting the couple had wandered into the hunting ground of a predator, a stranger who left just enough trace to torment the living, but not enough to be caught. To Clara, the discovery of the wheelchair was both closure and torment. She had proof her sister was dead, yes, but no peace, for the answers were buried as deeply as Elena had been. Standing at the crevice herself, peering into its hollow depth where rope lines still dangled, she whispered as if to the rocks, "You tried to tell me, didn't you? You tried." But the mountains, ancient and unmoved, gave her nothing back but the echo of her own voice. The discovery, instead of ending the mystery, had only widened it, pulling Clara and the world deeper into the labyrinth of uncertainty, where every path led not to truth, but to more questions, and every answer was swallowed by silence. The discovery of Elena's remains should have brought finality, but instead it opened new wounds that would not heal. And by the winter of 2015, Clara found herself unable to rest, unable to accept the fractured theories the police laid out with clinical detachment. To them, the evidence pointed in circles. Oliver's blood was present, but his body absent. Elena's injuries suggested violence, yet lacked a clear perpetrator. And the third DNA profile was a loose thread leading nowhere. To Clara, the silence was unbearable. Her grief hardened into obsession, and she began her own pilgrimage into the Appalachian wilderness, retracing the steps of her sister's doomed journey with a dog-eared map in one hand and the torn cover of Elena's diary in the other. The mountains loomed as if alive, their ridges wrapped in fog, their valleys echoing with distant calls that might have been birds or voices. Every night in her small tent she replayed the fragments of Elena's final days in her mind. The laughter over the phone, the campfire argument, the storm thrashing against thin canvas, the silence that followed. The wilderness felt complicit, each rustling branch a whisper, each shadow between trees a memory reaching for her. One afternoon, climbing along a steep ridgeline, Clara stumbled upon the entrance to a cave half hidden by moss and stone. Inside, her flashlight beam caught on objects that froze her blood. A collection of lost things, scattered across damp rock as if displayed in grotesque reverence. A cracked wristwatch, a waterlogged backpack, a pair of boots with laces still knotted. Some items were decades old, others more recent, all belonging to people who, like Elena and Oliver, had vanished into the folds of the mountains. The air reeked of damp earth and something older, something stale, and Clara's skin crawled as though unseen eyes watched her trespass. In the flickering light, she thought she glimpsed markings on the cave walls, crude carvings or scratches, but when she looked closer, they seemed only natural fractures in the stone, ambiguous as the mystery itself. She fled the cave, gasping in the open air, but the image of those belongings clung to her mind, confirming what she had long feared. Elena and Oliver were not alone in their fate. Forensics later confirmed what Clara had suspected, that some of the items belonged to other hikers listed as missing in old police files, disappearances that had been quietly abandoned over the years. The revelation stoked public terror. Was there a predator in the Appalachians, a hermit or killer who had stalked travelers for decades? Or were these remnants of accidents, gathered by the indifferent sweep of floods and landslides, nature's morbid collection of broken lives? No one could say with certainty. Meanwhile, forensic breakthroughs revealed something stranger still. The blood found on Elena's wheelchair, matching Oliver's, bore patterns suggesting violent injury near the crevice, as though he had been struck or dragged. Yet there was no sign of his body, no bones, no clothing, nothing to tether his fate to fact. Speculation bloomed like wildfire. Some whispered Oliver had been killed by the same unknown hand that ended Elena's life. Others insisted he had fled after her death, disappearing into another identity, leaving just enough of himself behind to muddy the truth. The diary fragments, reread under the scrutiny of forensic linguists, suggested more ambiguity. Phrases like, "he watches at night," and "Oliver doesn't hear it," could be interpreted as fear of her husband or fear of something else entirely. Clara clung to the possibility that her sister had been warning of an intruder, but the torn pages denied her closure. The case became folklore. Locals spoke of the Haro Crevice as a cursed place, where the earth opened to devour those who strayed too close. Hikers left offerings at the trailhead, flowers, crosses, scraps of ribbon, as if appeasing something unseen. Clara, unshaken by superstition, returned year after year, each pilgrimage taking her deeper into obsession, her life outside the mystery fading like mist in morning sun. In her dreams, she saw Oliver and Elena on that final night. Oliver's voice raised in anger, Elena's cries muffled by storm, and behind them a faceless shadow crouched at the edge of the firelight, waiting. Sometimes Oliver struck her in these visions. Sometimes he shielded her. Sometimes he vanished altogether, leaving just enough of himself behind. Each version ended the same: Elena's chair tipping, the crevice yawning, the forest swallowing her scream. By the final scenes, Clara stands once more at the edge of the crevice where the wheelchair was found, staring into its dark throat as the wind sighs through the rocks. Her face is worn, her eyes hollowed by years of searching, but her voice is steady as she whispers, "Tell me what happened." The mountains offer no reply. The camera lingers on the crevice, black and endless, as though the silence itself is the answer. Oliver's fate remains unresolved, the third DNA unexplained, and the truth buried where no light can reach. The wilderness remains indifferent, eternal, and in its silence lies the story's final cruelty: that some mysteries are never solved, only endured.